Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for Friday, November the 4th. Today, we are reading together from Job chapter 30, which is the portion of Job's closing argument, which shows the reversal of his previous fortune that is described in chapter 29. Chapter 29, he talks about the good life that he lived whenever he was being blessed by God. And again, if he's taking his experience of his life where he is doing good and then receiving blessings from God, that might lead him to the understanding that God does rule the world according to justice. And yet the way he is setting this up is to say, this is what it seems to be. This seems to be the way that God is operating today. This seems to be the result of a godly life. And yet he's going to switch in chapter 30 and begin talking about, but something changed. And where I used to be exalted and praised by the noble people of my city, now it's the worthless men who are hounding me and making fun of me and chastising me and ridiculing me. And Job was just wondering, well, how exactly is that? Why is this happening? How is this happening? Why is this happening? And as we get into chapter 30, beginning verse 20, we're going to see where Job seems to perceive injustice. That how can God go from blessing me for doing good things, and then I continue in the good things, and randomly he decide to curse me in a sense? And that's the idea of what we're seeing here in Job chapter 20. Or excuse me, Job chapter 30, Job chapter 30. So let me go ahead and get the text up on the screen for us so we can begin reading here in Job chapter 30. In verse number 1, again, in chapter 29 at the end, the men listened to me with expectation. My speech settled on them like dew. If I smiled at them, they couldn't believe it. They were thrilled at the light of my countenance. I directed their course and presided as a chief. I lived as a king among his troops, like one who comforts those who mourns. So that is chapter 29, but here we get to chapter 30, and the key word here is but now. But now they mock me. Who's the they? We'll see that here as we proceed on throughout this text. Excuse me. They mock me. Who? Men younger than I am. Those fathers I would have refused to put with my sheepdog, or whose fathers I would have refused to put with my sheepdogs. What use to me was the strength of their hands? Their vigor had left them. Emancipated from poverty and hunger, they gnawed the dry land, the desolate wasteland by night. They plucked mallow from among the shrubs, and the roots of the broom tree were their food. They were banished from human society. People shouted at them as if they were thieves. They are living on the slopes of the wadis, among the rocks and in the holes in the grounds. They bray among the shrubs. They huddle beneath the thistles. Foolish men, without even a name. They were forced to leave the land. Now I am mocked by their songs. I have become an object of scorn to them. They despise me and keep their distance from me. They do not hesitate to spit in my face, because God has loosened my bowstring and oppressed me. They have cast off restraint in my presence. The rabble rise up at my right. They trap my feet and construct their siege ramp against me. They tear up my path. They contribute to my destruction without anyone to help them. They advance as though a gaping breach, as through a gaping breach. They keep rolling in through the ruins. Terrors are turned loose against me. They chase my dignity away like the wind, and my prosperity has passed by like a cloud. Those are the first 15 verses. I want to stop right here just because it kind of shifts here in a second. And again, we want to compare what is said in chapter 29. We noticed that in the last few verses of 29. But we can also see, let's see here, back in 29 in verse number 8, talks about the young men would see Job and withdraw from him out of reverence. It seems the city officials, the noblemen, all of them, again, had a great respect for Job, and the noblemen respected Job. But now he says that it's the worthless men, the men I would not even have let sleep with my sheepdogs. Those foolish men, verse 8, without even a name, they are against me. They mock me and they ridicule me. These are men who again are worthless. They're not good for anything. They don't work hard. They don't serve others. They don't live for God. They're just kind of like animals. They bray among the shrubs. They huddle beneath the thistles. And Job here then begins using the metaphor of him being a city. He's a strong city, but God is against him. He's loosed his bowstring and oppressed me, he says. And because of that, these rabble, these individuals, these worthless men, they are able to trap my feet. They construct their siege ramp against me. Again, Job's setting himself as a city that's under attack, that's under siege. They advance through gaping breach, rolling in through the ruins. They tear up my path, and they contribute to my destruction. All these things, terrors are turned loose against me. They chase away my dignity like the wind, and my prosperity has passed by like a cloud. So there's been this transition from where he's been a blessed man to now he's being a ridiculed and mocked man. My life, verse 16, picking up there in verse 16, my life now. So that's who I was. Again, going back to previously in his life, when in the days when God watched over me, the good old days. So that's what it was. But now my situation is as if my life is poured out before me. The days of suffering have seized me. Night pierces my bones, but my gnawing pains never rest. My clothing is distorted with great force. He chokes me by the neck of my garment. He throws me into the mud, and I have become like dust and ashes. I cry out to you for help, but you do not answer me. When I stand up, you merely look at me. You have turned against me with cruelty. You harass me with your strong hand. You lift me up on the winds and make me ride it. You scatter me in the storm. Yes, I know that you will lead me to death, the place appointed for all who live. Yet no one would stretch out his hand against a ruined person when he cries out to help or to him for help because of his distress. I have not wept for those, or have I not wept for those who have fallen on hard times? Has my soul not grieved for the needy? When I looked for good, evil came. When I looked for light, darkness came. I am churning within and cannot rest. Days of suffering confront me. I walk about blackened, but not by the sun. I stood in the assembly and cried out for help. I have become a brother to jackals and a companion to ostriches. My skin blackens and flakes off, and my bones burn with fever. My lyre is used for mourning, and my flute for the sound of weeping. That's a conclusion of Job chapter 30. Again, now my life is poured out before me. Days of suffering have seized me. And he directs this toward God. He throws me into the mud, and I have become like dust and ashes. I cry out to you for help, but you do not answer when I stand up. You merely look at me. You have turned against me with cruelty. You harass me with strong hand. You lift up the wind to make it right against me. You scatter me in the storm. Yes, I know that you will lead me to death, the place appointed for all who live. Reading there again from verses 19 through 23. The point is, Job perceives injustice. Because in his mind, again, in the minds of these individuals, it seems clear that they are living under the assumption that God rules the world by strict means of justice. That if good things, if you do good, you receive good. If you do bad, you receive bad. That's kind of the idea everybody's working with. That certainly is the idea of the Friends. And therefore, they look at the result of Job experiencing bad, and they conclude that must mean he was bad. But Job recognizes that that's not the case. That's not the case at all. That he has been a good man. He's been a godly man. He recounted that in chapter 29. And things seem to be going according to his worldview up until he is now in this situation in his life. So that seems off to him. And that seems unjust. It is unjust for him to be a good man and yet to be in this type of distress. I believe that is the real point that Job was wrestling with here. That it seems, again, according to his understanding as a human, again, with their worldview, it seems as if God has been unjust against him. He's expressing that here within this text, that God is doing this to me. Now, for us, I might be thinking, well, this is obviously Job is sinning here. He is being irreverent. He's accusing God of things that are wrong. And while I certainly think that Job here is struggling we never see at the end where Job is accused of doing wrong. In fact, we're going to see in chapter 42 that Job is praised by God, and it really is he isn't the one that receives God's ire. It's his friends. Now, does that mean Job was right here? No, Job was wrong here. He was wrong in this. His conclusion at this point was wrong. But he's wrestling. He's wrestling with the reality of what's going on. His faith has never waned. Again, he's done this a number of times throughout these previous 3 cycles where he would say something like this, but then he would turn around and say, but my hope is still in him. Even though it seems like this is unjust, I still hope in God. So there is this place where we can be, where we're wrestling and we're struggling and we're thinking out loud and it just doesn't make sense to us. So we might even articulate that it seems like God is doing me dirty. It seems like God is doing me wrong. It seems like God is being unjust. We might even articulate that. And that is just, I think, part of the human element of just not being all knowing like God is we don't know. And we're trying to wrestle with these things. I think that's what Job's doing here. And in fact, what Job is going to turn around and do in chapter 31 that we're going to read tomorrow is he's going to say, you know what? If I have been like this, then I would understand if God would punish me. I would get that. If I were to do these wrong things, God would certainly be just to punish me in the severe way in which he has. But his eventual point is going to be in the end of chapter 31 that I haven't been like this. So my cry then at this point, Job's going to say in chapter 31 is I want an audience with God. I want answers. I'm trying to figure this out. I'm trying to understand. I just need to communicate with him. He just needs to hear me. If he's casting this case against me, then I need the opportunity to argue my point. And that's where Job's going to get in the next chapter, in chapter 31. So again, I've made this point before, but I'll make it again today, considering this chapter. There are times that we're going to wrestle with God. There are going to be times that we're going to wrestle with the realities that we're facing, and it's not going to make much sense to us why things are like they are. And it's okay to wrestle with those things. It's okay to even articulate them and try to work them out loud with the others. But may we always, even as we're wrestling, may we never lose our faith and trust in God. No, we might not understand. And no, we might never understand. Let me remind you, Job never gets the answers, at least as far as it's revealed to us. But he always trusted. And at the end of the day, even though he was wrestling so mightily with his reality, he still trusted in the Lord and had his faith firmly planted in him. And may that be something that really impresses us about the story of Job. I appreciate you so much for tuning into this reading today. Please continue to be praying for all within our church family who are sick right now. We have the sickness going through the church. It just is what it is. It's that time of the year whenever sickness really goes around. Let me encourage you to continue praying for one another, and hopefully we'll be able to get back as many as we can on Sunday. Again, thanks for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Friday, everyone. Take care, and God bless.